In January of 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at a dinner in his honor in Atlanta. A few months earlier, Dr. King had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent organizing against racial injustice in America. Yet, when a small group of Atlanta civic leaders sent out invitations for a celebratory interracial dinner, only a handful of the white business community replied. But then,
the CEO of Coca-Cola at the time basically called everybody together and was like, "You're not gonna embarrass us on the world stage."
He threatened to remove the headquarters from Atlanta, saying, "The Coca-Cola Company does not need Atlanta. You all need to decide whether Atlanta needs the Coca-Cola Company." Soon after, the dinner sold out. On the night of the event, Dr. King pushed those at the dinner to confront their values and to recognize how far the ramifications of injustice actually spread. He said, "Poor white men, women, and children bearing the scars of ignorance, deprivation, and poverty are evidence of the fact that harm to one is injury to all." It was one example of many in which Dr. King and the larger movement helped bring a moral frame to the issues facing the nation. What can Atlanta's past and present show us about the moral grounding we need to build a network of mutuality and promote human flourishing? I'm Angela Glover Blackwell. This is Reimagining Democracy for a Good Life, Chapter 3, The March is Moral. Democracy in service of human flourishing rests on a moral foundation, one grounded in mutuality and a shared understanding of what is being built and why your well-being is inseparable from mine. It's an equity framework that civil rights leaders in Atlanta advocated for and that the mayors have passed down to one another.
I get read in the Maynard story, the Andrew Young story, the Shirley Franklin, the Bill Campbell story, like the nativity scene, right?
Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens.
It is like John Lewis is sitting next to me or Martin Luther King is sitting next to me. We can't unlearn these facts that we've been given. And so it gives us the power and the understanding, but also the moral high ground to say, enough is enough.
And it's not just civil rights leaders. We need to also learn from labor activism. Here's activist Hillary Holley.
In 1950, 1960, we saw the domestic worker movement come together under Dorothy Bolden. And what folks don't know is the admin support behind the civil rights movement were the domestic workers.
Nathaniel Smith, founder and chief equity officer of Partnership for Southern Equity, comes from a family steeped in the movement.
Two of those people that gave me the inspiration in many ways to be who I am today were my aunt Claudette Matthews and my mother. And both of them worked at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is the organization that was founded by pastors and led by Dr. King before his assassination. We hear about the incredible leaders that walked, the John Lewises or other C.T. Vivians and other people. But, the movement was really built on the backs of everyday people.
And on the moral conviction that everyone has equal worth.
And with that, it required us to see everybody as God's child and see everybody as a part of a human family. And I think that through, Dr. King's vision and others of Kingian nonviolence, we were able to look at these broader issues and how the bankruptcy of empathy created a world that was not only harming Black folks, but white folks as well.
In 1968, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference centered empathy and mutuality when it launched the Poor People's Campaign. It was a multiracial coalition designed to specifically address the needs of the poorest and most marginalized. They proposed initiatives to improve housing and introduce the concept of universal basic income. The courage to stand up to the bankruptcy of empathy continues to animate activists for justice and inclusion today, like community strategist Grace Choi.
The blood, sweat, and tears that went into the civil rights movement and MLK Jr.'s legacy and John Lewis's legacy, like all the different people that have made Georgia what it is.
And activist Gigi Pedraza.
The first thing I did when I moved here was I started trying to learn as much as possible about the civil rights movement. It was quite a huge gap between what I had heard, what I had learned, versus the reality and how everything is still ongoing and, the fight continues.
Hillary Holley sees the current national movement to challenge economic inequality and take on the billionaire class as a continuation of the work of Dr. King and the civil rights movement.
His vision for taking on capitalism and bringing poor folks together and uniting, I think we are actually on the precipice of seeing that become real. And that's when we're going to see co-governing and this reimagining democracy. I really do.
We need to be disruptors of dysfunctional delivery systems. We need to understand the importance of policy and all of these things. But at the end of the day, if we don't work towards realizing a values revolution, then none of this work will be long-standing.
Nathaniel Smith makes a direct link between values, policy, and power.
A policy without a moral imperative embedded in it is policy that can be manipulated by ego and greed.
Nathaniel's work promotes equity in various areas like health, energy, and transportation.
I think that a lot of times people fail to understand that the greatest transportation advocate that we've ever seen was Dr. King. His movement began with the Montgomery boycott, fighting for transit equity.
And transit equity is still a big issue in Atlanta. Public transit acts as a vital lifeline for low-income communities. But Metro Atlanta's mass transit system, MARTA, is the only major U.S. transit system that doesn't receive state funding, and it only serves a limited area.
Because of the lies and the perceptions that many suburban counties that were predominantly white had about public transportation bringing crime or lowering property values, referendums will continue to fail and fail and fail in community. And a lot of that has to do with racism. Because a lot of times people talk about race, they forget the ism.
MARTA lags far behind other systems that started at the same time, like D.C.'s Metro. That system has 98 total rail stations, and it reaches deep into the suburbs. MARTA has 38. You might be wondering if they're different because of their populations, but Atlanta and D.C. have virtually the same number of people living in their metro areas.
For years, the MARTA has been trying to expand into Gwinnett, into Cobb, and other suburban counties.
Aisha Yaqoob Mahmood is the former executive director of the Asian American Advocacy Fund. Recently, a big focus of her activism has been MARTA.
In Gwinnett, we've had at least 3 referenda that have failed, that have tried to make it easier for MARTA to come in and connect with the local transit.
A significant challenge to MARTA's expansion is that
there's so much politics that happens when it comes to mass transit, especially in a place like Atlanta. Many, many years ago, the racial conversation started as, we don't want those people coming into our neighborhoods. And by way of saying that, it was, we don't want Black people coming into our neighborhoods.
I asked Nathaniel about this. I must say, the first time that I heard that people said MARTA stands for Moving Africans Rapidly Through Atlanta, I was like, whoa. Tell me about where that came from. I'm sure that is at the heart of why it is so hard to be able to allow the system to be able to reach the suburbs so that people can easily access it. But you tell me.
Well, I'll tell you, in all of my days, Angela, I've never sat in Black traffic or white traffic or Latino traffic. I sit in traffic. But yet and still, conversations around transit, in particular in the South, not just Atlanta, is a very racialized conversation, right? If you're in the Bay, if you're in New York and other places, you may have someone who is well-to-do standing next to somebody who has a blue-collar job.
A limited martyr has constrained movement throughout the region, limiting its effectiveness in impacting people across racial and economic lines. While poor and vulnerable communities bear the brunt, the whole Atlanta region suffers from the lack of a strong transportation network. Economically, the pool of employees shrinks. Environmentally, pollution increases with the number of vehicles on the roads. And socially, people have a hard time traveling to places of entertainment. The failure to build a truly regional transportation network was driven by and has perpetuated patterns of exclusion. Aisha again.
If I think about what is next on the horizon and what will really help working communities and working families in the region, it is truly access to real transportation that is going to be connected around the region.
Public transit is a clear, everyday example of the network of mutuality, that what affects one of us affects all of us. It is no accident that the civil rights movement had its birth around issues of transportation. As a student at Morehouse College, Dr. King thought deeply about the moral foundation of the work he would go on to do. In a 1947 article for the campus newspaper titled The Purpose of Education, Dr. King stated, quote, "We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. The complete education gives one not only the power of concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate," end quote. It strikes me that one reason why so many leaders with moral grounding have come out of Atlanta through the years is because of the teachings at the 6 local historically Black colleges and universities.
I just wanted to be a part of that, Angela, and I wanted to be of the legacy of a Howard Thurman or Dr. King or Maynard Jackson. And those were just great people that I just wanted to follow behind and try to emulate as I grew up.
Nathaniel went to Morehouse in the tradition of those men, and many others too, including his father. Interestingly enough, Nathaniel tells a story of a conversation he had with a civil rights mentor.
I was talking to him about all of the things that I was doing to try to grow and be a leader. You know, I was actually the National Youth Spokesperson at SCLC when I was in high school and was a staffer at SCLC, the youngest staffer when I was in college there at Morehouse. But he told me, he said, all of that is fine and well, but go make some money. That is why we did what we did, so you can go make money. You know, and I think that's a very real and pragmatic way of looking at things. And so it's tough because you want to be able to provide for your family, but you have to choose. And I think you know that too, Angela. Like, I can't even imagine if you didn't choose this path where you would be right now. But when you're obedient to your assignment, you can't do anything else but that. And that is why I chose this path, because I deeply believe that there is a difference between employment and an assignment. And I think that my life has really been an assignment more than just about a job.
Nathaniel connects this idea of life as an assignment to his faith. It encourages him
to not only be a bridge builder, but also embrace the power of the Black prophetic tradition, which is a tradition of individuals from our communities being willing to speak truth to power with a level of authority that not only comes from a degree or a credential, but it comes from the community, you know, a community that has given and sent that person to speak on behalf of their suffering and their needs.
I have been impacted by many things while focusing on Atlanta this season. One of the most noticeable is that many of the activists, organizers, and elected officials I've spoken with have a moral grounding that's rooted in their Christian faith. It comes up continually in my conversations, like with Nathaniel and with organizer and voting rights activist Helen Butler.
I grew up in the church. I, did lots of things in church that taught me different skill sets and how to relate to other people and how to feel empathy. Even though I didn't have a lot, I could still help with others who were even less fortunate than I was. And the more that we brought our community along, the better we would be.
Author and historian Dr. Maurice Hobson.
I love the work that I do on the American South. I love the work that I do in terms of civil rights and politics. I love the work that I do on popular culture. And I try to do my historical work in terms of civil rights in the same vein as Jesus the Christ. I try to come and help the least of these.
Faith in action as a moral foundation provides a basis for Grace Choi.
My faith calls me to think beyond myself and think about how can I use what I have in order to serve others and make the world a better place. It sounds so corny, but it's like, if I can play a role in helping people to tap into their full potential as a human being, to thrive and present themselves as fully who they are, to be able to contribute to the goodness of the world and to the common good and to the well-being of your neighbors, of society, of your global neighbor, that is something that really drives me.
I think that faith leaders are moral leaders, and we should try in our work, whether it's in the pulpit or on the page, in the poem or in the line of a song, whether we're activists or we're working in a company, wherever we're at, people should know that we are faith leaders.
That was author and ordained minister Dante Stewart.
But our faith and our morality has to be about people feeling better and being given more of themselves when they leave our presence. If it can't do that, then I don't know what faith is for. And a lot of times when your theology is rooted in fear, then the expression of your religion would hardly be rooted in love and acceptance. Partly because you're always going to be approximating to a God you can't see rather than accepting of the people that you can.
What I saw as a kid growing up in the church, seeing my parents give so much to the church and congregation, especially being an immigrant church, it was a community center. So that's where you learn how to learn English, how to get a green card, how to get a job, how to enroll your kids in school.
Grace's upbringing as a preacher's kid has a lot to do with how she approaches her activism and organizing.
If there's an issue with the courts or a traffic ticket or something, a run-in with the law, my mom would go and interpret for families in our church in front of the judge. And so it was kind of like my parents were social workers, uncertified social workers out of necessity for our community. So I always saw like my parents live out their faith in action in service. And so it's very natural for me to go into public service and to the political space where the value is around service and putting others' needs first.
President Jimmy Carter was Georgia-born and raised with a well-documented faith and is considered by many to be an example of leadership anchored in moral grounding. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002, primarily for work after his time in office, promoting international relations, democracy, and human rights.
Mr. President, when you think about the American soul, the American character, what do you think the best parts of us are and the worst?
This is from a 2019 interview with historian and presidential biographer John Meacham. Here's Jimmy Carter's response.
Well, the best parts are when we treat people as equals. And I would say that equality of treatment of people is this foundation for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And between African Americans and white people, between men and women, between the downtrodden and those who have everything. And one of the essences of human rights is that if there is an obvious disparity between opportunity for people, is to make everybody have basically the same opportunity for advancement, good education, health care, things of that kind. So I think equality would be the one word that I would use to describe it.
And the worst?
Inequality.
Atlanta's current mayor, Andre Dickens, agrees.
Poverty and inequality are our persistent enemies. They are Atlanta's Goliath.
In early 2026, Dickens took the stage to celebrate his re-election and share some of the goals for his second term.
And as we all remember from Sunday school. When David faced Goliath, he didn't bring an army. He brought 5 smooth stones. Atlanta's 5 stones in this fight are affordable housing, investing in neighborhoods, opportunities for our youth, keeping residents and visitors safe, and all while prioritizing ethics, financial stewardship, and good government.
Towards the end of his address, he declared that Atlanta needs to tackle inequality head-on and punctuated it with his faith in the city's ability to do and be better.
Which brings us back to the biblical story. David does not negotiate with Goliath. He does not manage him. He does not accept him as inevitable. He defeats him. And like David, Atlanta has never backed down from hard work. In our Atlanta, we are done with managing poverty. We are done with tolerating inequality. We are done with accepting violence as destiny. These forces are not permanent. They are not unbeatable, and they do not get the final word.
When challenging ourselves to reimagine democracy in service of human flourishing, it is a moral imperative to do something about those with the least.
I am a son of the South, and my roots really emerge from Alabama. Very similar to John Lewis, who was also a son of Alabama.
That's Dr. Alex Camardelle.
I was drawn to Atlanta because of the promise of what Atlanta offered, which was Black progress, Black wealth, and the visual influence of seeing Black folk in leadership and political leadership was something that was new to me as a young person who wanted to break into a space that honored and celebrated Black brilliance. And I love this place. I celebrate the promise of what it will be one day. And, I also sit in an interesting seat where I critique where it falls short and fight every day to make sure that we acknowledge the shortcomings and then come up with solutions to fix them.
Alex is Vice President of Policy and Research at Kindred Futures, which focuses on addressing economic injustice.
At the end of the day, we are centering people in our work, in our narratives, in our solutions, and that's what keeps us morally grounded.
The mission of Kindred Futures is to build the wealth of the poorest Black households across the American South. The moral foundation of that mission is right there in its name.
We are future focused, right? So there is a bit of futurism that's built into the way we think about the organization's priorities. The other really important part of it is the kindred part, which honors the quote around being in a web of inescapable mutuality, right? We are all connected to results that ultimately would benefit Black folks. And so while we have a specific focus in building the wealth of Black households and we're race explicit, we're not race exclusive.
Say more about what you mean by that.
When we talk about being race explicit, we're talking about being courageous in naming the thing. We're talking about saying that in Atlanta, the racial wealth divide is 46-1. And if we don't acknowledge the magnitude of the racial wealth gap in a place like Atlanta, then the solutions will completely miss the mark. So we have to honor some of these challenges, especially economic challenges, acutely harm Black people. And we cannot shy away from that. But the solutions, while they may also serve as a blunt instrument to improve the opportunities for Black folk, they also ultimately improve opportunities for everyone. And so we want to continue showing that you don't have to be exclusive in your analysis, but we have to be direct and honest about who is more acutely harmed by some of the policies or the other decisions that are being made.
Alex, I identify with it so much because early on in PolicyLink's history, we talked about equity being the superior growth model. Oppression of Black people has been so ingrained in the history of the nation, in its economic system, in its political structure, that those things that were designed to hold Black people back became part of the systems of governance of the nation. And they hold a whole lot of people back. Now, I think young white men without a college education are experiencing this as much as black people. If we don't remove those barriers that have held black people back, those barriers will hold the nation back.
Exactly.
To strive for economic equality, there must be intentionality. And particularly in Atlanta, it's important to acknowledge that the economic fortunes of some black residents do not simply trickle down to the poorest black residents.
I live blocks away from Tyler Perry Studios, and I think he's often, along with other celebrities, raised up as examples of what black folk can be in Atlanta. But we have to also hold that the vast majority of black Atlantans may not see $1 million in their lifetime. The median household income in Atlanta for black folks is about $30,000 a year. The median net worth of black people is about $5,000. And so I want us to just always remember that we have to honor the aspirations of those that fall below that median.
That's the moral goal of a democracy where economic inequality doesn't hold back large swaths of the population.
We recognize that closing the racial wealth divide or addressing wealth deprivation is not a matter of just having enough money in your pocket or in savings. It's about dealing with the barriers to participating in the voting booth. It's about barriers to addressing or building climate resilient homes that can withstand climate change and climate disasters, especially in the South, where we have so many, and they're increasing. So all of these issues reflect the multi-issue nature of Kindred's work, which is very diverse and not focused just on helping black people create savings accounts, right? Which is important, but not the only thing that we're focused on.
The kinds of solutions that Kindred Futures is pushing for, investment in baby bonds, expansion of first-generation home ownership, raising incomes, and strengthening worker protections, are very much a part of the lineage of the civil rights movement. And they are finding that Atlanta is a great place to test drive these policies.
One other big motivator for us is, Atlanta is our home base, which means we have a commitment to demonstrate impact and results, and that we can get it right in Atlanta if we're ever going to try to get it right anywhere else, right? We're really kind of starting to make sure that Atlanta remains a place where folks can come out and demonstrate or create proof of concept of what can promote economic mobility and community wealth building, which is a really important concept for us at Kindred. And we truly believe that, if we can't get it right in Atlanta, then we have to be careful about adopting or taking lessons to other places.
The civil rights movement was guided by moral conviction, and the movement made historic progress with a pointed strategy toward justice. Now, activists and leaders in Atlanta are combining a strong moral commitment and strategic precision to go further, to address extreme poverty, advance equity, and build a city and a region where all can participate and prosper, inching ever closer to the goals of mutuality set by the civil rights movement. The whole country can learn a lot from Atlanta, its history, its inspiring activism about values, fortitude, and expansive, open-hearted faith, and about what it takes to build a moral democracy, one that is true to its ideals, its name, and its people. What if you don't just show up in the future, but eagerly embrace a future you helped design? If this idea appeals to you, you should join PolicyLink this August 24th through 28th in Washington, D.C. for Summit 2026. We are the founders, writing the unfinished story of our democracy. This is a summit for builders, organizers, artists, teachers, policy thinkers, people ready to move from me to we. Expect bold, challenging conversations, plus music, dancing, art, and immersive experiences. At Summit 2026, you'll help shape a blueprint for the next generation of democracy, from housing and water to the economy, culture, and governance. Come recharge. Come co-create. Come reimagine democracy for a good life. August 24th through 28th at the National Harbor in Washington, D.C. Register now at summit2026.org. Be a democracy futurist. On the next chapter of Reimagining Democracy for a Good Life, race, place, and power.
There are many historic black neighborhoods that are being gentrified in the city or have been gentrified. It's like a snowball.
What's important to us is that as much land we can take off of the speculative market, we have more control of people being able to remain in spaces and thrive.
Reimagining Democracy for a Good Life is a podcast created by PolicyLink. We are grateful for the PolicyLink funders whose support allows us to produce this show. For a transcript of the episodes and more resources, visit policylink.org. The research, writing, and editing for this show has been a team effort. And for that, I had the immense pleasure of working closely with Darby Maloney, Emmanuel Hapsis, Fran Smith, Glenda Johnson, J.Ann Barry, Perfecta Oxholm, and Yinka Rickford Anglin. Our senior managing producer is Camila Kashani. Fact-checking is Will Tavlin. Legal review by Prager Law. Our senior audio engineer and mixer is Pedro Alvira. Our social media team is Lola Toms and Katie Mont-Bryan with Uncovered Media. Theme song by Don Will and music by Epidemic Sound. Special thanks to Lauren Madden, Montana Rain, Mike Hasid, Moeed Ishrat, Denise Dunn, Lisa Serta, Nathaniel Smith, WABE, Bravo Ocean Studios, and to PolicyLink CEO Michael McAfee and PolicyLink President Ashley Gadir. I also want to thank all the guests who appeared in this season. They were so generous in sharing their wisdom, passion, insights, love, including tough love, for the place they call home. I'm Angela Glover Blackwell. Thank you for listening.